All right, so, we've been getting a ton of messages from listeners about this whole learning thing, right? Like everyone wants that secret sauce for learning faster, remembering more, and actually using what we learn without feeling like our brains are about to explode.
Yeah, it's like we're all drowning in information these days.
Yeah.
No one's really taught us how to swim, you know?
Exactly. So this deep dive is all about exploring a really cool idea, this idea that we're all natural-born storytellers,
Mm.
and how we can use that to learn better. You sent over this article by Shiva Narayan Taxshila Page that digs into this.
Yeah, it's a fascinating piece. It argues that our brains are literally wired for storytelling from the get-go, and that this isn't just some fluffy feel-good thing. It's actually a fundamental way we understand the world around us.
Which is pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to figure out how to leverage this story-making power to supercharge our learning, make information stick, and maybe even become better problem solvers.
We're also going to look at some frameworks that the article mentions, like instance-guided object learning, or IGOL, and something called brainpage theory.
Yeah.
They might sound a bit jargony, but we'll break them down and see how they tie into this whole story thing.
So let's start with this big claim that we're all born storytellers. Where does this idea come from and what's the evidence?
Well, just think about little kids, right? They're constantly making up stories, creating these whole worlds with their toys or even just in their heads.
Yeah, my niece does that all the time.
Yeah.
Like she'll turn a cardboard box into a spaceship or a castle. It's amazing to watch.
Exactly. And the article points out that this isn't just child's play. It's actually a sign of our brain's innate ability to string together events and ideas into a sequence and narrative. Even before we have the language skills to articulate those stories, our brains are already organizing information in this narrative way.
And it helps us make sense of things, especially complex ideas that might otherwise feel overwhelming.
Right. It's like our brains are saying, hey, I need a story to hang this new information on. That's how I'm going to make it stick.
So it's not just a psychological observation. This article actually talks about the neuroscience behind it, mentioning something called the default mode network, or DMN. Can you explain what that is?
The DMN is kind of like the brain's storytelling engine. You know how sometimes your mind wanders when you're not focused on a specific task?
Yeah.
That's your DMN kicking in, weaving together memories, daydreams, and bits of information into these internal narratives.
So this is why my best ideas come to me in the shower, when I'm totally zoned out.
Exactly. And the article highlights a few key regions within the DMN that are like the all-star players in this story-making process.
Like the posterior cingulate cortex, or PCC. I remember the article calling it the hub for our personal narratives.
Yep. Think of the PCC like your brain's personal biographer,
Yeah.
constantly shaping your experiences into your own unique life story, which is kind of cool when you think about it.
Yeah.
Then there's the medial prefrontal cortex, which is like the editor weaving those individual events into a cohesive narrative, adding context and meaning.
And finally, there's the angular gyrus. It's like the master translator, right? Converting abstract ideas into the language of our internal stories.
Exactly. That's what makes those abstract concepts relatable and understandable. It's like the angular gyrus is saying, okay, how can I turn this complicated theory into something that fits into this person's existing story of the world?
Okay, so we've established that our brains are story-making machines. But how does this actually help us learn new things and apply that knowledge to different situations?
Well, the article explains that story making acts as this bridge for knowledge transfer. When we encounter new information, our brains instinctively try to connect it to our existing experiences and organize it in a logical story-like way.
Yeah.
Almost like creating a mental timeline or a plot.
So instead of just memorizing isolated facts, we're weaving them into a narrative that makes sense to us.
Exactly. And that makes it way easier to remember and recall the information later on. Plus, it helps us predict potential outcomes based on what we already know from our own life stories.
It's like we're constantly writing and revising our own personal textbooks based on our experiences. And those textbooks are way more engaging than the ones we had in school.
Right. And that leads us to instance-guided object learning, or IGOL, which is this really cool framework that builds on this whole idea of connecting new knowledge to what we already know.
So how does IGL work in practice?
Basically, it's about anchoring new information to familiar objects or scenarios that we already have strong mental representations of. Like, think about a student trying to learn a new math concept.
Math always makes my brain hurt, so I'm all ears.
Instead of just trying to memorize abstract formulas, they can try to relate those concepts to real-life objects or experiences. Like maybe they can visualize dividing a pizza into equal slices to understand fractions. Or they can think about a basketball game to grasp probability.
Oh, I see. So it's about giving those abstract ideas a role in a familiar story that makes them less intimidating and easier to understand.
Exactly. And the more vivid and engaging that story is, the better the new information will stick. That's the power of IGOL.
The article also talks about how storytelling helps us with writing and problem solving, which makes sense because a good essay or a solution to a complex problem often has a narrative flow to it.
Absolutely. When we're writing, we're essentially constructing a narrative. We're introducing characters, setting the scene, developing a plot, and drawing conclusions. And those same storytelling skills can be applied to problem solving, too.
So how do we actually use storytelling to write better and solve problems more effectively?
Well, the article outlines a few key steps.
Okay.
First, we need to identify the core idea of our story or problem. What's the main message or the central challenge we're trying to address?
So it's like finding the thesis statement for an essay or the root cause of a problem.
Exactly. Then we need to create a narrative structure with a beginning, middle, and end. This helps us organize our thoughts and present information in a logical and compelling way.
Just like any good story needs a clear beginning, middle, and end to keep the audience engaged.
And it's important to incorporate real-life examples or data to support our points. Just like a good storyteller uses vivid details and anecdotes to bring their story to life.
Yeah, it's like adding those little details that make a story memorable and relatable. Those are the things that stick with you long after you've finished reading.
And finally, the article emphasizes the importance of using visual and emotional elements to enhance our narratives. Think about how a powerful image or a moving story can evoke strong emotions and make a message unforgettable.
It's like that saying, people will forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. Emotions are powerful memory anchors.
Exactly. And when it comes to problem solving, the article suggests that story making can help us mentally simulate different scenarios and visualize potential outcomes, almost like running thought experiments in our heads.
So it's like we're creating branching narratives, exploring different paths and consequences before making a decision in the real world.
Right. And that can help us anticipate challenges, weigh options, and choose the most effective course of action.
Now, this all ties back to the concept of long-term learning, which the article links to brainpage theory. Can you explain what brainpage theory is and how it relates to storytelling?
Brainpage theory is this fascinating idea that learning isn't just about passively absorbing information. It's about actively processing and encoding that knowledge into our neural circuits, creating these rich, interconnected networks of understanding that we can easily access and build upon.
Like building a mental library with well-organized bookshelves full of information that's readily available.
Exactly. And the article suggests that story making is a powerful way to develop these brain pages, because stories naturally engage us on multiple levels.
So how does storytelling specifically support brainpage development?
Well, first off, stories require active engagement. We have to follow the plot, connect the dots, anticipate what's coming next. And this active processing is what helps us solidify those neural connections and create lasting memories.
It's like the difference between just reading a recipe and actually cooking a meal. The act of doing something with the information makes it stick.
And then there's the emotional connection we talked about earlier. Stories that evoke strong emotions activate our limbic system, which is heavily involved in memory formation. So those emotional tags make the information more meaningful and memorable.
It's like how we easily remember the stories that made us laugh, cry, or feel deeply moved. Those emotional connections leave a lasting impression.
And the third point is motor science activation, which basically means that our brains simulate actions even when we're just reading or hearing about them.
So if I read a story about someone climbing a mountain, my brain might subtly activate the muscles I'd use to climb, even though I'm just sitting here in a chair.
Exactly. It's like our brains are rehearsing the action, creating a more embodied and therefore more memorable experience.
Okay, so all of this is super interesting. But how can we actually apply these ideas to our own lives? What are some practical things we can do to boost our storytelling abilities and enhance our learning?
The article offers a bunch of great suggestions. One is simply reading more books. Regularly immersing ourselves in different narratives expands our vocabulary, improves our comprehension, and naturally strengthens our own storytelling muscles.
So it's like going to the gym for our storytelling brains.
Yeah.
The more we practice, the better we get.
Exactly. Another suggestion is creative writing. Even if it's just journaling or free writing, getting those thoughts out on paper in a narrative format helps us organize information, develop our voice, and strengthen those storytelling skills.
And for the more visually inclined folks, the article mentions mind mapping, which is basically creating visual representations of information in a way that resembles a story with branching pathways and interconnected ideas.
Yeah, that can be really helpful for seeing the big picture and understanding how different concepts relate to each other.
Absolutely. And for people who learn best through hands-on experiences, the article recommends role-playing and simulation games.
That makes sense. because those activities require us to think on our feet, make decisions based on incomplete information, and adapt to changing circumstances. It's like learning through experience, but in a safe and controlled environment.
The article even briefly mentions the idea of brainpage schools, where the whole learning model is built around this concept of storytelling and active engagement. Sounds pretty revolutionary.
Yeah, it's all about fostering deep understanding and practical application rather than just rote memorization.
So to wrap this up, it seems like this deep dive has reinforced a really powerful idea. We're all natural-born storytellers. And that's not just a fun fact about our brains. It's a key to unlocking our learning potential.
Exactly. By consciously tapping into this innate ability, we can make information more memorable, relatable, and applicable, and ultimately become more effective learners, writers, and problem solvers.
Which brings me to my final thought for our listeners. Considering how naturally our brains create stories,
Yeah.
how might consciously structuring even everyday tasks or information as mini narratives impact your understanding and retention in areas beyond formal learning?
That's a great question to ponder. As the article's call to action suggests, unlock that storytelling power within your own brain. After this deep dive, maybe try reflecting on a recent piece of information you struggled with and see if framing it as a mini story with a beginning, middle, and end helps you grasp it better.
So it's about finding the story in everything we do. Food for thought as always. Thanks for diving deep with me. Until next time.